Hi, as I was introduced before, my name is Dominic, or you can just call me Dom for short. I prefer that, Ms. Barrett. I've been a photographer. I'll just give a little bit of a rundown of who I am and my experience. I have been a photographer about 5, 6, maybe 7 if you count that. No, yeah, I'm gonna say 6 years. Yeah, I've been a photographer about 6 years now. I have worked and I have grassroots from the LA area. I was born and raised in California. I have worked with influencers, actors, actresses, startups, young businesses and whatnot in order to get my foot in the ground with freelance and some commercial work. I've taken portraits of many different people of all creeds, races, sizes, you name it, I've probably taken a photo of them. And if whatnot, I'm just a humble photographer that works hard, and I know a little bit good thing about lighting, and I'd like to share that now with you all. So before we start, I just want to say, I just want to ask, what is everyone's current knowledge with photography? Would you say you're more of a hobbyist? This is a little bit more professional? Just so I can know exactly where I need to start. Let's start with you. You was Hendel's, right? You said that you were, I couldn't have helped but overhearing, you said that you were more of a hobbyist? Yep. Okay, that's totally fine. A hobbyist is completely natural. I started as a hobbyist and I just ended up trying to make it a career. And Lindsay, I'm so very sorry.
You're good.
All right, you said, okay, so Lindsay, are you more of a hobbyist, a little bit semi-professional?
I have a student job in photos, but I wouldn't say that I'm a professional.
Okay, so we're gonna go with around the realm of semi-professional. Ballpark it kind of a little bit?
More on the humble side.
More on the humble side. Okay, I see. I didn't catch your name, by the way.
No, I'm Dan Butler, and I do photography for myself, and I do it for friends.
Okay,
So
that's totally fine. All right, that's
I'm
fine.
not a professional.
Okay, that's totally fine. And I didn't catch your name?
Graham.
Cram, pleasure to meet you, Cram. So hobbyist, semi-professional, what do we got?
As a photographer, I would say hobbyist.
Hobbyist? Okay, cool. Lots of hobbyists today. That's nice to hear. Oh, pleasure to meet you. I didn't see you come in. So, Brendan, pleasure to meet you, Brendan. Yeah. So we're just going around. I'm just trying to get a little bit of an idea of who the type of people coming in. So I just asked everybody their names and about what is their current level with photography. Would it be more of hobbyist, semi-professional? Have you done some work for some people, for a friend?
Professional.
Professional? Okay, wow. So we've got about a 1-to-5 ratio or a 4-to-5 ratio with a bunch of hobbyists and one professional. That's good to see. Okay, all right. So that gives it a good down. The first thing I want to say with shadows is it's a little bit mathematical with photography. And I know that's something a lot of people, especially creatives, don't want to hear with math because we went to the creatives so we wouldn't have to deal with math. But there's a little bit of math that you have to go into it. As you can see with some of the work I have displayed here, that I genuinely love shadows in my photography, especially studio and portraiture. Shadows are something that needs to be exemplary in your photography, simply on the grounds of it pushes a little bit more out of the person you're photographing. It gives them a little bit of contrast, it gives them an edge, it gives them a personality. And continuing on with that, one of the number one things that many people don't end up being told on a lot of YouTube video tutorials on this is how you get good shadows, or oh, this is how you get really good contrast in your black and whites. The one thing they'll never tell you is that there is a fundamental property on capturing shadows in your photography, and what that is called is the important shadow detail, or the ISD. What the important shadow detail is, sorry, just got to double check my notes here, it's been a while, unfortunately, is the, apologies, there we go. What the important shadow detail is, in definition, is the darkest gray with full detail. That is what your ISD is, and that sounds a little confusing, right? Like darkest gray, what does that mean? Essentially, it began with print and film photography. You see, there's a huge list of steps in order to get your ISD with film. First of all, you'd have to meter, then you have to use a little bit of calculations, you have to do a little bit of editing, then you have to do post-processing with your film, and then you have to do paper strip. Thankfully, we have digital, so none of that is needed unless you go back into film, which some are these days in photography. It's kind of crazy, but still, where you use your ISD in order to capture your shadows. First step, it's really simple. I assume everybody knows how to operate their camera, right? You know, semi-regularly. We all know to put it in manual and fix it up a little bit. If you want to do a little bit more aperture-based work, you throw it in aperture priority mode. Am I losing anybody when I say that? Or is everyone getting the idea? Okay, good. So the number one thing is that when you do go for looking for that important shadow detail is when you see someone's face and when you light them up in a natural setting like outdoors or in a studio setting with your own strobes, you want to look for the darkest thing on their face or in the shadows of their face when you're lighting them, and you want to make sure you find that darkest shadow. Let's make a little bit of an example here. Let's say this is our light source, right, with this strobe. A little bit right there. And let's say we've decided, you know what, let's do a little bit of something kind of unconventional. We're doing a complete side light, right? So if we were to look for the most important dark or the darkest gray with full detail, what would be the darkest thing to meter for if the light source is this and there is no other form of light? Where would that important shadow detail be? Does anyone have a kind of a guess? Go ahead.
On the right side of your face.
Right side of my face, right? Where would you want to ballpark that, like the cheek or a little bit underneath my neck or something like that, right? You generally want to look at the person's facial features so that way you can find exactly where that little bit of the darkest gray is. Okay, you have that spot. Does everyone know what spot metering is on your camera? Or am I losing somebody when I say that? Everybody gets the idea, or is anybody lost? Go ahead, it's fine to say that if you're a little bit unfamiliar with spot metering. I'll give a quick explanation. Okay, what spotter metering is that it's a special setting that you can put on most DSLRs. A lot of film cameras already do it, but when you put your camera to a specific setting called spot metering, it will designate one red dot on the screen that on your viewfinder on your camera. So when you meter for something, like, you know, when you half press the button and you get that meter reading, when you get that little red dot at a specific location, it is giving you the neutral right there on only that spot. So for when you spot meter, and again for our example where I'm standing here and my light source is here, you're going to want to meter for here. You're going to want to get that little red dot in your viewfinder and put it on that exact location. Or if you have a light meter, you can use that too. You go for it, and let's say, for example, since we're using a flash here, we're going to have it at 1/25th of a second. We decided to go with ISO 100 because we don't want to have digital noise. And let's say the meter reading was, I don't know, how about f4? Everyone can get an idea with that, right? Okay, so we have our meter reading. We have it all laid out. 1/25th of a second, f4, and ISO 100. So, I mean, you got it. You got the important shadow detail, right? What do you do next? You just press the shutter and you got it, right? Wrong. Because the important shadow detail is not what you're actually exposing for. Am I losing anybody when I say when you meter and you expose for? Does anyone get a little confused when I say that? You can raise your hand, you can tell me, you can nod, I just want a little bit of a signal. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is with the important shadow detail is you want to meter for the important shadow detail, but you don't want to shoot for the important shadow detail. Because if you were to shoot at what the settings you get when you meter for the ISD, you will get an underexposed image. Because you're going to be overexposed image because you're metering for the darkest part of their face. But since you metered for the darkest part, and in this case, in our example, my right side of my face, everything else on the other side is going to be completely overexposed. So what do? You spend all that time metering and figuring it out. Why do I need it? Well, here's the reason. You use what you know from the ISD to mathematically calculate everything else you need. Let me explain. So we said before that our metered for our ISD on the right side of my face is f4, right? All you need to do to get where your exposure should be is simply going 2 stops down. That's it. That's where your exposure is supposed to be calculated at. So I'm just going to ask, where do you go, or let's say, what is your aperture when you're going from f4 and you're going 2 stops down? Does anyone have any idea when you're going 2 stops down from f4? What is the number on your aperture? 8? He's exactly right. So you've gone 2 stops down. What is that? That is your exposure. That is where you want to be photographing mathematically so that way you can get the exposure proper because along with the ISD, there is something that's completely the opposite to it that is called the important highlight detail. And the important highlight detail is the exact same thing as the important shadow detail, but it's opposite. Like I said, remember how I said it's the important shadow detail? The important highlight detail is that it's the lightest gray in the image with full detail. Because I'm going to assume that everyone here works with digital, right? Pretty much so? Okay. All right. So, as you know, when you work with digital, let's be real. You get those highlights too high, that information is not coming back in Lightroom or Capture One or in Photoshop. That detail's not coming back. Shadows always have a chance. Highlights, no. You get that highlight too bright, there's no information, there's no texture, there's no nothing. It's like when you photograph a wedding and you better meter for that wedding dress, because if you don't and there's no detail on that wedding dress, that bride is going to be mad. Trust me. Anyway, so if you want to find out your important highlight detail, as I said that it was important, it's the countermeasure to the important shadow detail, it's the exact same process that we got with the exposure. You go another 2 steps down. So we said that our important shadow detail is f4. Our exposure is at f8. Go 2 more stops down. What is your IHD then? It's the same process. You went 2 stops down. What is the next 2 stops down? It's just, I know it's weird, but does anyone can give me a guess? Anybody? You can use your camera if you need to cheat. That's fine. You can use your camera if you need to cheat.
Stops up from F8?
Well, it's not up, it's down.
Oh, down.
Yeah, 2 stops down.
Okay. Not 3, is it?
No, it would not be it. Remember, we're starting off at F4 with the ISD, the important shadow detail, right? And we went 2 stops down to get F8. So now you go another 2 steps down. What would that be? That's all you got to figure out. If not, I'll give you guys a quick second to figure it out.
10. 16.
There it is. That's what I was looking for. F16. 2 stops down. You want to go full stops, not half stops, full stops. If stops are a little bit confusing, then honestly, there's a bunch of different references I can go to that explain how to properly measure stops. Trust me, it's weird math to figure it out, but honestly, in general, once you get the hang of it, you just figure it out. If not, trust me, I do this all the time. Cheat. Look up a cheat sheet on how to properly measure stops and what are proper stops, and just use it as a reference. Trust me, it works all the time. All right, back to what I was saying before. So we have our important shadow detail. We have our exposure. And we have our important highlight detail. We've all been able to calculate this mathematically. You know, we've all gone with the big brain mathematical way of getting this perfect exposure, right? So we've got everything, right? So let's say, for example, okay, we have this, and we've got everything we need from our math. So now, what is our exposure again? It's 1/125th of a second, F8. F8. Remember, we started with F4, 2 stops down to get our exposure, and then another 2 stops, that was our important highlight detail, that was F16. So remember that, F4, F8, F16. Okay? Everyone following along with that? Okay, good. So now we have everything we need. So, apologies. Now that you have that information, now I want you to go ahead and meter for the highlight. Why am I asking you to meter that highlight? Well, sometimes the math doesn't add up to what the light is actually showing. So let's say, for example, from what we have here, and with our highlights showing, and we meter for the highlights, we know from our math it should be F16, but let's say it's coming out F11. Oh no, that's not what we have. So it's not as bright as we had hoped. All you would have to do in order to fix that is you just have to adjust your exposure about half a stop or even a quarter of a stop. That's it. So remember how I said our exposure was f8? Drop her down to like f9, or if it's a little too bright, you know, either way, just get it a little bit of an adjustment with the exposure. If you have to, go a stop above or below to compensate for the exposure, because you don't want that highlight to be too bright or too dark, because as I said before, if you lose the detail on that highlight from it being too bright, it's not going to look good. And if the highlight isn't bright enough, you're not going to have enough contrast. So I know it's a lot of information to gather up at first, but trust me, it's a little bit better in practice than it is mathematically. It's a little confusing, I understand. So going from there, does anyone have any questions right now? Like how to properly calculate it or how to properly see it? Because I have my camera and we have a light, we can do a quick little demonstration on how to properly see it.
I think that's going to be very helpful.
A little demonstration? That's totally fine. That's completely fine. Don't do that. Okay. All right. Can everyone go ahead and get up with for one quick minute so we can all get like a good idea of this? We're all just going to gather around just a little bit. All right. Now then, who wants to be the volunteer? You can. I just need somebody to stand right here for just one quick minute, and we can all get a good idea. Let's see. Anybody at all? All right. I guess I'm the one that's going to be going up on stage. Who wants to hold my camera for me so that way they don't lose anything? Lindsay, how about you? Okay. All right. All right. Go right ahead. Okay. So give me 1 second here. Just want to go ahead and bump up the power on this little bad boy. A little strange, but yeah, he gets the job done right. Okay, there's a quick little test shot here. All right, that's good enough. All right, here you go.
You're gonna have me control the buttons.
Yes, that's totally fun. Are you familiar with a little bit of camera and everything?
Is the camera?
It's a Nikon. If you want, I can have you right there and I can explain everything if you'd like.
Yeah.
You prefer if I was the one on the
Yeah,
camera?
please.
Okay, that's totally
Thank
fine.
you.
Let me just go ahead and move this here, and let me just adjust the light a little bit for you. So again, we're just going to be doing this quick little demonstration to understand everything. So, in this scenario, can you come ahead and get a little bit closer for me, please? Thank you. Just a little bit closer, just a little bit closer. You can go ahead a little bit closer to the light. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so in this scenario we're seeing here, I want everyone to point out where would be her most important darkest detail. What am I saying? The ISD, as I said before. What is the ISD in this image? What are you looking for in this image that is where you want to keep the darkest gray with full detail? The darkest thing in this image, right here in this little portrait we have, this little tight little portrait.
Again, I would say it's on the right side of her face.
Right, that's true because it's not being shown on the light, right? So all right, so we have this location here on the cheek. Sorry if you're a little messed up here because we're all just staring at you, okay? You don't have any stage fright, do you? Okay, cool. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and get my camera on spot metering. Does anyone want to see my screen right here so that way they can see what I'm talking about in terms of spot metering? All right, gather around. Let's gather around right over here. That's release mode. Come on in, go right over here. Come on. Everybody can huddle up a little bit. All right, single point focus. Here we go. On most cameras, I use a Nikon. Not sure if everyone has a Canon or a Nikon, but on most cameras, you have a setting here with your metering. What you want to do, oh, come on, don't do that to me. All right, like I was saying before, you have your metering right here. When you go to your metering, you have usually 3 selections. Matrix metering, center weighted metering, and spot metering. The one you want to use in order to find your ISD is spot metering because, as I said before, does everyone see here on my screen that there is this little diagram here on my viewfinder that will tell me exactly where I'm pointing? This little dot here on my viewfinder will be the only thing my camera meters. That'll be the only thing my camera is going to be metering in this scenario.
So when it meters, it's adjusting the focus and that?
Yes,
Shutter
exactly.
speed and aperture and all of that.
It's not going to adjust shutter speed and aperture unless you have it in like auto or in aperture priority mode, because that's different modes. But if you have it in manual, it will only be metering and focusing for that spot, because we're just metering for that spot, right? Because once we're done, because then we can move our focal point and whatnot, because we have the math. The math will be easy to do.
So when you're shooting manual, it's telling you what the exposure should be. Is it telling you with the f-stop and the...
Yes, yes, of course. Like, let's all back up for a little bit so I can get, Lindsay, would you be so kind to get back a little bit towards the light? Thank you. So, let's say for the ISD, does everyone see this little shadow here on the right side of her cheek, right there? Let's say I want that to be my ISD, right? So what I'm gonna do with spot metering and with my viewfinder, and let's go ahead and go on live view mode here. I'm sorry, I'm working with a 50mm, I'm being a novice. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and use my viewfinder to get right there on her cheek. And we're gonna take a quick test image. Is that okay, Lindsay? Okay. Now, I want everyone to take a quick look at what the image we have here. Really dark, right? All right. Oh, Lindsay, you can go ahead and take a look too. And as we can see, it's really dark right over there on this right side of her face because that's her only light source. So, and as we can see, my histogram, or sorry, my meter shows that it's very negative. So I need to adjust in order to properly expose her. So, as we all know, so I'm going to go ahead and go again and look for that right there on that side of her face. And I'm just going to adjust for everything I need in this shot. Let's say right around there for demonstration's sake. Come on, be nice to me here, focus. Okay, you don't want to focus, right? I am so sorry, Lindsay. Okay, there we go, that works. So let's take a look at here. You see in this image, let's all take a quick look. As you can see with this image, we have a nice amount of gray here with detail on her face, right? Mm-hmm. All right, we have that nice amount of detail, but look, everything is overblown on her face. Even the grays are overblown. Mm-hmm. That's not a good image, right? Mm-hmm. That's what I was saying when you don't want to shoot for your metered, for your metered ISD. You don't want to shoot for that. What you do want to do, however, is you want to shoot for the exposed. So, for my image here, I shot at 1/25th of a second, f2.8, and we're not going to talk about ISO because we're working with mixed light here. So, working with what I know about my aperture, what is supposed to be the calculated exposure? Remember, you're going 2 stops down. So, what would that be? If you need to grab your camera to do a little cheat sheet or doing a little cheating, that's totally fine.
You shot it at
2.8, yes, 2.8.
2 down would be 4. Okay.
Go a little bit more. You're almost there, though.
Isn't that 2 stops from 2.8?
1 second. 1, 2, 1, 2. Actually, yes, you're totally right. Yeah, f4 should be the appropriate exposure. So now we have all that together. Lindsay, would you be so kind to get back to the light? All right. And we're just going to go ahead and get another image here. Okay, good. Oh, okay. So I want everyone to take a quick look. As we can see here, all right, so we have some good detail here in the face. It's a nice gray. Here, I'm going to show everybody. It's a nice gray there. You can see there's still detail. Mm-hmm. However, our highlights are really bright. Mm-hmm. So our IHD is much more than what we would have calculated. Because remember, we started at 2.8. Everyone remember that? 2.8 is our ISD. F4 is our exposure. But our highlight is really strong. So we need to compensate for that highlight. If seeing how overblown this side of her face is, how much would you say I would need to go up? Would you say 1 stop, 2 stop? Anyone have any suggestions?
1 stop?
Just 1 stop? Let's try 1 stop. You know what? Let's go 1.5 just to be safe. Let's try 5.6. That sound good to everybody? That's a good number. All right, Lindsay, if you don't mind. Thank you. Let's get a nice shot there, Lindsay. Looking great. There we go, much better. And remember, we are using with only one light source here, so, but as you can see, there's still some gray and some detail on that side. Take a look, there's still gray and detail on that side. Take a look. Paul, you can take a quick gander too if you'd like. Yes. As we can see here, there is highlights with detail, there's shadow with detail, and there's a middle gray kind of in there with all detail. And we found that using the ISD because we metered for that one side of her face and we compensated for the highlight. Does everyone understand that? Does anyone have any questions so far? Don't be afraid. Lindsay, I can see you're getting a little skittish. You doing okay? Do you need? Okay, all right.
The confusion for me, and I don't want to get us off track.
Okay.
You're using the camera to meter. And I don't use the flash a lot. But
Okay,
the
that's
flash
fine.
is going to produce light that's different than ambient light.
That's true, yes. Flash is completely different light than ambient light. Are you talking about white balance, or are you talking about just
I'm just talking about the amount of exposure.
the amount of exposure? Okay, no. Okay, that's totally fine. If we're using ISD in a naturally lit setting, we can't control the light, right? We go outside, the sun's our light source, right? It's our main light, correct? We can do things like we can get like a huge diffuser to neutralize the sun a little bit to make it a little softer. We could do that. But you can still use ISD for natural light because let's say it's about, everyone knows golden hour, right? Everyone knows the golden hour is the best time to take a photo, right? So if you go out during golden hour and let's say the sun is about 45 degrees that way-ish. I'm sorry to throw in some math again, but let's just say it's that way and the person's standing kind of like right here, like let's say for example the sun is that pipe right there. So I'm standing right here and the pipe's up there and you can see the light. When you see the light on me, you have to look for that ISD. Like in this current situation right now where you're looking at me, what would you say is the darkest point, even if it's kind of light because the light of everything in here, because it's really nice soft wrap around, what is the darkest part on me? Just right around here under the chin, right? And let's say we want to make sure that chin or around my facial hair will keep that detail, right? Because if we let that bleed or we let that burn too much, there's no detail and it looks like a weird black haze, right? There's no detail, it's nothing, it's gonna look bad. So when you do have that natural outdoor light, you meter for that ISD, in this case underneath my chin, you get that meter reading, you go, as I said, where you go 2 stops down, and let's say for sanity's sake, we started at F4 on my chin, underneath my chin for the ISD. You go 2 stops down, you get to F8. That's your exposure. And then mathematically, your highlight, which would be probably like this portion of my head here, because the sun's up there, and it's gonna be hitting right here, this is your highlight. From there, you're gonna be like, okay, so if I start at F4, I'm at F8, now I'm at F16 for my IHD, I'm gonna have to meter for this highlight, so that way, in case there's any problem with the highlight, like let's say it's a little too bright, I'm gonna have to mess with my exposure a bit by how, you remember how you said go above like maybe a stop or two to compensate for that, and boom, I've got a perfectly exposed image that requires very little post-process touching. This is why I love this process. I know it's a little tedious to think about, but trust me, once you get the hang of it and you get the math or you use your cheat sheets like I do, you'll instantly get it and it'll be just a quick little, okay, I've got a meter for that. Okay, then it should be this. Okay, meter for the highlight. Oh, it's a little bright. Gotta adjust my exposure. You're done. You get the image, you get a perfectly exposed image. Beautiful.
So, is it you adjust the aperture to the darkest area and then the exposure to the lightest?
Okay. Can you repeat that again?
Are you adjusting the aperture? To
Yes,
the
you're
darkest
adjusting the
area and
aperture.
then the exposure to the highlights.
You're not adjusting the exposure for highlights. Well, actually, yes. I'm sorry, I confused myself. Thank you for being able to show that that's possible. But no, yeah, you are metering for the shadows, like you said, for the and when you get to the highlight portion, yes, you're adjusting for those highlights because you don't want those highlights to get too powerful or too dim. Because has everyone taken an image that has really bad contrast and there's like no, it just looks kind of bland, there's no highlight, there's no real shadows, it's kind of like this grayish tone thing. Looks kind of bad. You don't want that image, right? And we all know what an image looks like where we just saw it, where one spot's too dark and one spot's too bright. So we don't want that either. We want to get that nice even tone, right? This is why you use this method, so that way anytime you take an image, you'll be able to instantly get that perfect exposure, whether you're outdoors with natural lighting or indoors with strobes.
So how do you get the strobe to produce the light as if the meter?
As I press the shutter, you mean? I have a tether onto, well, that's a different subject matter entirely, but I'll give a quick understanding. What I have right there is like what's known regularly as a speed light, traditionally speed light. Lindsay, you can come over here too and take a look. I don't want you standing there the entire time. Yeah, no. It has a sensor. This is a speed light, and it's hooked up to my sensor here on my camera. And what I do is I have it slaved. That's a term that we actually use called slaved, where when this thing is hooked up to my camera and it is adjusted for my settings, and this thing is slaved to this device. So whenever I decide I'm just going to be like, I'm going to press my shutter release button, flash goes off. That's the beauty of that's the beauty of slaving, because whenever I press this shutter button, you're going to have a flash come out, and that's why strobe lighting works so well, because you have the light set up in this position exactly where you want it, and the reason why we have our shutter speed at specific moments, apologies, is because most digital cameras, as well as film cameras, have a thing called a sync speed. Does anyone know what that is?
It's the speed that allows all the light to go through and doesn't shock it.
Exactly. The most general sync speed for all DSLRs is 1/125th of a second. So whenever you're shooting with strobes, you always want to have your shutter or your shutter release at 1/125th of a second. Because any slower, you're going to get choppy light. Any faster, you're going to get choppy light. 1/125th is your golden number when you're working with strobes. Does that answer your question? Okay, good, we answered that. All right, so is there any questions about what I've talked so far with the ISD, how you calculate it, how you use it, or how you handle it with people in indoor and outdoor settings? Any questions at all, totally free. No, everyone's got a pretty good grasp on it. Everyone's got a good understanding. Okay, good. I'm glad we got that out of the way. So let's all take our seats again really quick.
Is there a reason you have your display to show black and white rather than color?
I just did it so that way we wouldn't have any choppy color, because we're working with mixed lights here, and I just didn't want to have like a really weird looking image where your skin is green, because I forgot to change my white balance. So I just have it on a special black and white setting on mine, so that way I wouldn't have to deal with it right now. So don't worry.
You don't usually shoot in black.
I don't always shoot in black and white. No, trust me, if any photographer says they shoot in black and white, they're pretending. Every photographer knows a secret that you can do is, oh, this image doesn't look so good. Throw it in black and white, it'll look great. Done. That's all you gotta do. Ask any photographer, like, I dare you.
I've done it on clients' photographs before. I've had a photograph that's like the perfect photograph, but there's something wrong with the light, something wrong with the color balance, and I just can't get.
Trust me.
Black and white?
Trust me, I know that pain so well. The color balance, do not get me started. Like,
Yeah.
Sometimes when you just don't want to deal with it, you ask like, hey, do you want to see this in black and white really quick? And they go like, yeah, sure, let's see how it comes out. And you just do it, and it's like, oh, thank God, it looks perfect. Yeah, any photographer that says otherwise, don't do it, they're lying. We always do it just to get out of the dealing with color work, unless you have specific profiles already set up that handle that stuff. But honestly, that's lazy. You just do it yourself. But that's another topic for another day. Okay. All right, so we've got our understanding how ISD works. Let's go ahead and do a little bit of a kind of idea of what to look for and why shadows are important in general. Because I've given you the big hoity-toity mathematical way of understanding it, but let's understand why we want to have shadows in general. Why do we do it? Let's take a look at this image right here. And just for starters, what would you say is the ISD of this image here? What is the darkest gray with full detail?
Here.
Like right around here, right around there? You're correct. The ISD is right here, and where would you say is your IHD? And remember, it's important, highlight detail.
On his finger,
On his finger, like
down closer.
right around this area right here?
Well, I would have done above,
I wish we had a laser pointer. That'd be great. Little finger right around here.
Right there.
Right there. Yeah. All right. So that's good. You're looking for it, right? We're looking for that that shadow, and we're looking for that highlight, because that's what we're looking for, right? Exposure is not important right now. We're looking for the shadow and highlight. Now that you have that shadow and highlight, you can do everything. But I want to ask, why? Why would you want to do that? Why are you putting so much emphasis on getting those highlights and those shadows right? It's simple. Can anyone tell me why this image works with shadow and highlights specifically? Can anyone tell me why? Like, just say a descripting word. Just throw what goes ahead in your mind. Just go ahead and just let it out.
It ends up being a very three-dimensional image because of how his hands are pulled out.
Exactly. We use shadows because we want to have 3D. We want to have dimensions. We want to have layers with our image. Because if it was kind of monotonely shot, this image wouldn't work, right? It doesn't have like any layer. Everything would be kind of meshed. It'd be kind of neutral gray. Like there'd be a gray around here that matches over here on this part of his hand and everything. It doesn't work, right? So that's why we do it. It's also for contrast. You want to have those differences in contrast because it pulls out the image, and it also gives it a little bit of tone, a little bit of emphasis, a little bit of let's say, what's the word I'm looking for? Direction, I want to say. You want to make sure you understand, oh, hi, pleasure to meet you guys.
How's it going?
Hey, you guys just missed a little explanation, but don't worry, we'll go over everything again.
What's the 10-second summary?
Oh, okay, you guys missed the mathematical portion, so that's not going to be 10 seconds.
I'm terrible at math, so it's a good thing to get that.
Okay, let's see. All right, right now we're talking about why shadows are important and why we are trying to make shadows work in our photography. So,
I'm David, by the way. I'm David, by the way.
David, pleasure to meet you, David. And you are Dustin. Pleasure to meet you, Dustin. All right, let's. Dominic, I am the instructor in this little professional seminar. All right, so let's take a look at this next image right here. Can anyone tell me why this image works using the information we know now with shadows and highlights? Go ahead and tell me. Remember what I've already told you, and go ahead and tell me what you think, why this image works.
Okay,
If you have it, go ahead.
yeah, like so there's heavy emphasis on the shadows, obviously. Like there's a background, so there's a lot of subject separation because we see our eyes are naturally drawn to the bright spots. So then we go from the nose and out to the face, and we can, even though the eyes aren't necessarily traditionally like well illuminated, what we're able to see is that little bit of hair light over there, and we're able to make out certain contours, especially like the chin and the face. So it allows us to focus on, like clearly the photographer is trying.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but did you hear what he said? What he was saying about the contours of the face? Shape. Shadows and light give shape. Like how you said with 3D on that previous image we were looking at, shape. That's what you want to have with your shadows and lights. You want to have that shape, that 3D. Remember, what are you looking at with the picture? It's a two-dimensional object, right? Especially on the screen, it's 2D. But when you maximize those shadows and highlights, you create an image, something that's 2D with projection that becomes 3D, because you can look at it and you can feel the three dimensions, right? Like you can feel like there's a cheek, there's face, there's a chin. You can feel all of that. That's the importance of shadows and with your lights. Let's go ahead and look at another image. Can anyone tell me why this image works with shadows and highlights? Anybody can say anything they'd like. No wrong answers here.
Essentially a silhouette of two people.
Well, it's almost entirely shadows and highlights. I mean, there's not a lot of detail in between, with the except, or at least from what I can see from my angle I'm at here.
If everyone needs to get up to get like a better viewing angle, that's totally fine.
Because I can kind of see the detail on her chest, but you can't see much detail on her face. Okay, maybe I'm just.
If you need to get up to get a proper viewing angle, that's totally fine. But no, like I can, like exactly, like you were saying something just a moment ago. Like, can you go ahead and elaborate?
Silhouettes, basically, kind of like the light only being used to highlight their outline or whatever.
And again, what have I been talking about in order to emphasize that? Because you said it was silhouettes, right? And the light imaging, and what else? What was that one word I kept saying? And there it is. That's what I was looking for. Shape. You're using highlights and shadows to create that shape. Because especially, I love the thank you for bringing up that it's silhouettes, because this is quote unquote a silhouette because we're trying to create shapes. Can anyone try and tell me what shape I was trying to make here? There you go, right? You can make somewhat abstract feeling things with lights and shadows. This is why these are important, because you create these interesting nuanced things that many people wouldn't think about. And once you start using that shadow and highlight, you genuinely push yourself to another level that a lot of people don't like to think about or don't think about. Because as I said before, I have never seen a single YouTube video out there that talks about this. And it hurts me because I know the reason why is because this comes from print media. And the reason why print media did this, and film specifically, is because you don't get to throw this image in Lightroom to fix it in film. You don't. So you had to make sure those shadows and highlights were proper, which is why ISD was such a constantly practiced thing with professionals.
You had a lot. You did have some techniques that you could.
Yeah, there are of course techniques you can do.
There's so much more, because I actually took film photography in high school.
Yes.
And there's so much more labor intensive and so much more guesswork, and quite honestly much more pricey. 'Cause
Yes.
you end up like toasting 10, 15
And let's be real, reshoots were a big thing back then, because let's be like, hey, this entire roll of film didn't work. Are you serious? We got to do another reshoot. That was a thing, and that was the world of film for a while. Now with digital, I feel like we're a little spoiled sometimes with digital, because it's like, oh, I don't like how this came out. I'm gonna throw it in Lightroom, give it a filter or a preset, done. And it's like, you're not thinking. Once you think when you're taking the shot, you don't need to do that. You get a great image from the start. You just got to improve on it. That's what I love about getting these shadows and lights so down.
Can I maybe just ask, how did you accomplish this?
This particular image?
Yeah.
Okay, not a big deal. What I did, this is continuous light. Does everyone understand what I say when I'm saying continuous light?
Not a flash. You had like an actual.
It's a hot box,
Yeah.
a hot light, basically. If that's what I mean by continuous light. It's a continuous light, and what I did was I metered, well, I didn't say essentially meter. It was a lot of guesswork because, let's be real, I wanted to make sure that there's a small emphasis of detail on this face. You can tell like little parts here, like on the nose, and little parts on her face here have smidgens of detail, right? I did all the work of using with the important shadow detail, but I did massive amounts of exposure compensation for my shadow. So that way I can make sure the shadow still has detail, and I'd let the highlights blow up a little bit. That's how I accomplished this image.
So, I'm curious, if you didn't find this on YouTube, where did you find information about ISD?
I learned it
Like
through college. I was trained professionally through a college programs and whatnot, and essentially I had a film professor that when he was doing specifically medium and large format cameras, this was the big thing. If you didn't know what ISD was and you couldn't calculate it or handle it, get out of the class, because that's the entire class, just using different medias from the cameras. Because does everyone know what medium and large format cameras are? Or does everyone have a ballpark idea, or who doesn't? No idea? Okay. Has anyone ever heard of a Hasselblad camera? Those weird cameras that jettison out and you look above, like down, like it has a screen this way? That's a Hasselblad. Exactly, right? That's a Hasselblad. Those are medium format cameras. The film strip isn't a 35 millimeter. It's a much bigger variant, and it comes out, it's still in a film reel, but it's a much bigger variant. And with these cameras, metering isn't really all that easy. So you have to use light meters, and you have to use flashes and whatnot, and you have to use this method in order to get these images to work. Because if you did it on film and you just said, oh, I'm just gonna do whatever, like how you normally do with digital, and you just work with the exposure, blah, 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 all that, image is gonna come out too dark, too bright, it's gonna look out kind of grayish and kind of blobby, and the image doesn't work. And you learn that through trial and error. I'm not expecting anyone that comes out of here after they understand what the ISD to get it at the first try. I don't expect that. It took me a while to get, trust me, it's difficult, especially with the mathematics that I was talking about with the stops. Remember how we were talking about that? It's kind of weird to get that on the spot. So sometimes you just need to look at that cheat sheet, or just to do it and write it down on a piece of paper. It just helps. But also to talk about large formats, another reason why you want to make sure you get that ISD down perfect. Are you familiar with large format?
I met a guy who made his own large format.
Nice, impressive. But large format cameras, have you ever seen those super large on a stand? Beyond, it's got bellows, it goes in and out like this, it kind of curves a little bit too, and they have like this little drape over their head and they're looking at something in it. You remember that kind of thing? That's a large format camera. It has one film strip on two sides. That's it. You have two chances with that one little box that holds that film to get that image, and you're done. That's all you get, unless you buy more of them, and then you put them in their own individual cartridges, and you take them out and make sure there's a process to this. And you better learn that process if you want to use those cameras, because if you mess up, you expose your film, and as we all know, the moment you take any form of film and show it even the dimmest of light, it's ruined. It's done. You're never going to use it again. Maybe you can save it, but it's on rare occasions. That's why using important shadow details are necessary for that print medium when you get to those larger formats, so that because you didn't have second chances. You didn't have the opportunity to just throw it in Lightroom and fix it. Which is why I use it in most of my photography, because I want to get those images to be just as good as they are in film. That's the reason why we use it. But let's continue on. All right. This is not, again, a portrait, but I thought I'd throw it in there, throw it a little bit, give you guys a little bit of a curveball. You know what I mean? Can anyone tell me what the ISD, remember, darkest gray with full detail. What's the darkest gray here with full detail? The chord? You talking about this chord here? Exactly. You want to keep that detail on that chord, right? Because you want to make sure it doesn't look kind of weird, like it's kind of like ethereal. Because if you don't get that chord, this plank's not going to show up. These spokes aren't going to show up. All that's not going to show. So you need to find those ISDs in an image just as you're looking for them in person's faces, so that way when you find them in these moments, you can meter for that spot, work to get your exposure, meter and do the mathematics to get your IHD, important highlight detail, to make sure this isn't too bright. But since it's neon, you can kind of cheat. Let's be real, it's neon light. We can cheat kind of a little bit on that. Okay, let's continue. This is a little bit more of a impromptu in the screenshot. So as you can see, obviously there's moments like this that you can't really calculate for the ISD, because really there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of things. It's a little bit of motion, but let's focus on, instead of ISD for this image right now, we focus on the shadows and the highlights. What would you say is the darkest shadow in this image, and why that's important to look for? And just take a second to look at it, get an idea.
Perhaps the exterior, like outside of the bus? Like,
Around this area right here?
yeah, looking at the window out.
Like the window out? That's true, yes, exactly. That you want to make sure that has detail, right? Because if not, that's pure black.
Yeah.
Nothing's out there. That's going to look weird. And everything in here is going to look a little bit too overexposed.
Right.
So now, obviously I don't have to tell.
Yeah, you said why is that?
Yeah, why is that important? And I kind of gave you the answer.
But I'd say probably also because I guess exposing for this one had to like take into consideration like the shadows, like with the bus out, like with the sign out in front. But
Not to mention we have different lights mixing up and
Yeah,
everything.
mixed lighting.
Yeah, mixed lighting. That's just, see, this is why I said a lot of people put it in black and white, because sometimes we just don't want to deal with mixed
'cause,
lighting.
Like, you don't see the flaws with color.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's easier to hide.
It's easier to hide in black and white, but still,
But like especially since like he's standing so close to the light, like it's to the fluorescent light. Like inverse square law means that his face is more likely to get overexposed because it's so much closer.
exactly. Thank you. Thank you so much for that answer. All right, let's say for this, kind of a street shot here, what's the darkest thing? We'll just lightning round it. Darkest thing, go. Anybody got an idea? Darkest thing.
Part of the car back there.
These parts of the car right over here, like this little area right here?
That's what I think.
That's what you're thinking? Anybody else have any ideas?
Yeah, I agree. Real well.
Wheel well right there?
Yeah.
All right.
Real well.
Everyone's kind of in agreement that that's the darkest thing? Good. You found the ISD, the thing that's darkest, but you want to make sure that has detail. And also, I just want to point out one more thing. Just because you think you found something that might be the important shadow detail doesn't mean it could be. You might have made a bad call and the image is just not working from that one spot. Remember how we were talking about with the outdoor setting and we got like with the light up here, it's a golden hour, it looks nice and goldeny and everything. And you said, okay, right there underneath his chin is where it's gonna be. What if I just shaved and I got no fuzz here? And it's just kind of, let's say, my ear is actually the ISD because it's not getting exposed from the light. And let's say we're under a tree and it's really narrow light and it's kind of, diffused. There's things you have to accommodate for, there's things you have to look for. And just because you think you found it doesn't mean that that needs to be your ISD. You can play around with it. You just need to get good with the mathematics of it and then how to calculate it, and then you can play around with it. Even then, you don't have to do it perfectly. You can still play around, because remember how we talked about like with the little images that we showed? Here, I want to make sure, Danny, right? Daniel?
I'm Dan.
You're sorry, you are
David.
David. I'm sorry. Ugh.
Okay.
All right. I just want to go ahead and show you guys as well. These were some of the images that we were taking before. These are some of the images that you two can see. These are some of the images we were taking before. And you can see that in this image that dark is a little bit dark in here, right?
Yeah.
And because of a little bit of finagling, we were able to get right there with this image. And you still have full detail with grays in there. And you have your highlights not burning up too much. That's the thing I wanted to make sure, but I'll make sure to double tell you all that stuff. But anyways, of course. But moving on from what I was talking about before, you found that ISD, highlight. What's highlight here? What's your IHD?
Say half the light coming through the windows, half the fluorescence on the
Like this light here, this
the
right
hard light coming
here.
from
Yeah, exactly, right?
The hard light that's being projected onto the
Yes, exactly. So your IHD probably here, maybe these lights down here, right? You want to go for here. And so you also, and when these settings, you have options to pick from. You can find these things that might also be your ISD or your IHD, and you just have to play around with it. This is another image, and again, what's the darkest part?
Inside of his, no, his beard.
Right there?
Yeah.
Good. What's the IHD?
No.
Or that bar in the
Like this area here, this whole area right here? Good. And again, remember sometimes I wasn't really getting it all that well with this image, but let's be real. This kind of shows you that even if you have a bad image that's kind of blurry and bad, using ISD, this is kind of solid. Still okay. And again, as I said before, turning in black and white really helps. It really does help sometimes. Okay, who can tell me what's wrong with this image? What did you say? Exactly, it's flat, right? Can anyone tell me why it's flat?
Everything seems to be on the same plane, when it's really not. Well, with the model in particular, it seems that she's on the same plane, but she's really spreading out her body, trying to look three-dimensional. And perhaps there's a combination of compression as well, or like the distance away, like the ratio of the distance away from the
Exactly.
subject as well.
That's all very true. But in terms of lighting specifically, let's focus on lighting for now. What's wrong with the lighting here?
It's flat.
It's flat, right? Why though? Like, can we think about
There
it?
aren't really any shadows, and I'd say the part with her knee should have some. Her knee should stick out more.
Right. Like the thing I was looking to hear was that it's too diffused. There's no hard shadow. There's no bright highlight. It's just diffused all around. This is to show you that when you don't use and trust me, I took this image. I make mistakes. We all do. Like I said this earlier to Paul, for every 1,000 images a photographer takes, there's only 10 that ever get seen. Trust me. I know. I did a photo shoot last week, took over 300 images. I only showed the client about 20. That was it. Trust me. But no, yeah, as like we were saying before, as you can see, it's diffused, it's flat, there's no shadow, there's no highlight, there's nothing. You can't, you kind of have to do something with this thing in Lightroom, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to look at this image. It's kind of, bleh. Get it out of here. It's gross.
So in an outdoor setting like that,
Uh-huh.
where you have flat lighting, how should you deal with it?
How should you deal with it? Okay, so like I said before, this is diffused, right? This is diffused lighting. What's the best, does anyone have a good idea how to handle diffused light? What's a good scenario?
One thing to do would be add a light box, a soft box, and create shadows.
Create shadows, that's a good idea. But let's say, okay, we all here in Michigan, right? And we all know clouds happen all the time. It gets really diffusey and gray. What's a good way to make diffused light look good? Or should I also say, who looks good in diffused light? Kids. Who else? Ladies. Ladies look good in diffused light. Let's get rid of everything about what's wrong with the image, and let's just focus here on the face for just 1 quick minute. Can we all do that for 1 quick minute? Matter of fact, I might even zoom in a little for us. Oh geez, it's even terrible up close. But no, yeah, let's look here. Like, as we can see here in the zoom up, not bad, huh?
Yeah, that's better.
Not bad, huh? That's a way to make diffused light work, because ladies have generally, their facial structure is a lot more rounder than men. So the reason why soft light and diffused light work so well is because, with ladies essentially, is because of the natural angles of their face. You want to make a lady look nice, make them look proper, make them look a little more ladylike, right? Soft light does that beautifully with anybody that wants to look a little bit more ladylike or a little bit more glamoury, I want to say. Unless you want to do beauty hotspot lighting, but that's a entirely different situation. But no, like as we can see here, with this soft diffused light, the way it wraps around her face, gives that nice little round, it looks good, right? Looks pretty good. She looks pretty okay with this kind of lighting, right? And again, the opposite goes for males. So if I'm saying soft light works for ladies, hard, sharp light works for guys, because it's that term I was using before. What was that thing I was saying before? Shape. That's it. You want to shape men to be more angular, more rugged, more tough. This is general. There's exceptions to the rule, but generally you want to make guys look more angular. Shadows and harder lights. Let's go back to a previous image. Oh God, why? Okay, it's still zoomed in. That's not right. But this image here, he looks pretty tough like this, right? He's got that jaw, he's got the cheeks, there's like that hard everything with the hand, and you can see the cheekbones there. You can see all of that, right? That's hard light working on a male face. You make them look angular, you make them look you give them this triangle-ish look. We all seen like with let's say for example Sports Illustrated, we all know that they're all using strobes, but it's all on harsh light, right? Because let's be real, those abs gotta look deep. Those abs gotta look deep, they gotta look mean, right? And with guys, hard light works, but soft light works beautiful for ladies.
So what do you do if you have like 2 people?
Two people? You need to make a compromise, because you don't want to mix lights, because then that never works in a single image. You need to make a compromise. There are plenty of different situations where you do need to make a compromise with your lights. For example, you have a couple. One's black, one's white. What do? You expose for the person with the darker complexion, because you don't want to lose those shadows. But then again, you also have to watch out for the highlight, which is the person with the lighter complexion. When you have this problem, you need to find a lighting scenario. Usually, the way I like to do it is I like to use a bit of a softer light. Usually with strobes here, you have these things called diffusers, and this soft light does pretty well for generally both guys and gals. And in outdoor settings, and it's a hard daylight, throw them under a tree. You get a pretty decent light. You want to make sure you expose properly and handle everything properly. And again, there are exceptions to the rule, but you want to find compromises, especially if you're dealing with different scenarios. Because let's be real, couple shoots are a thing, right? So you need to find that type of lighting, that type of image, that type of exposure that works for both evenly. And it helps so much sometimes to have a test shoot with them. So that way you can look at them in that setting, especially with things like engagements or weddings, and you have the couple, and you can get them to come in just for one day in the setting where they're gonna have their wedding, so you can look at them, get some good shots for a test shoot, and be like, okay, now I know what I need to do. So when you do it when it's go time in the wedding and you're there for 6 hours and your feet hurt, you already know what that lighting situation is. You're done. So what I'm saying is a little bit of prep work, compromise, and knowing your lighting is how you handle those situations. Any other questions so far?
So you're saying do this with mirrors, and you have not said at all, sunny 16.
Sunny 16, yes. Sunny 16, that old adage. Everybody knows that if it's bright outside, you throw it at 16 and you're done. I'm going to be real, yes, the sunny 16 rule does kind of counteract some things with ISD, because sometimes you just want to get a good exposure on that person, and sometimes you don't have that. Let's say the person only has 15 minutes and you just want to get the image. In that setting, I don't blame you for going for sweet 16 there. I don't. Because let's be real, it's a lot easier to go with something tried and true than trying a little bit something more experimental or a little bit more nuanced. So there's no shame in using that. I shouldn't say shame. It's more or less, it's a tried and true method. It's a good way to get it instantaneously. ISD could work with a Sony 16. Like, let's say you want to make sure that exposure is at 16. So you look for that shadow and say that's going to be at f8. And you're going to make that highlight f32, and you're just going to roll with it there. You can do that. It's possible to do that, but I can agree. Sometimes you want to use that 16. Anything else?
Most of the cameras today will take a series of shots
Mm-hmm.
where you get to adjust just slightly, like adjust by a third of a stop or whatever.
Oh, you're talking about continuous
Yeah.
continuous shooting that also has adjustments already pre-laid from the camera. Okay.
Would that allow you to quickly get the shot, measure the ISD, quickly get a shot that is likely to come?
Yes, that can work, because let's say, for example, like again with this image here, highlight here, shadows around here, right? You get that shadow, you figure out your exposure, but you don't really have that time for the highlight, so you're like, you know what, I got my exposure, I'm gonna put it in that continuous with the multiple different variants. And then you can look at those variants and say, you know what, that's the variant, that's the one I got it. Just go with that. And once you figure out that's the variant you want, just turn your camera to it, and then there you go. And then who knows, maybe the one that's a little bit brighter is even better, maybe the one's a little bit darker is even a little bit better. It's worth experimenting, because that's the beauty about ISD. It's not a perfect, you got it, it's done, you're done, you make sure you shoot that exposure at that every single time. That's not it. It's moldable, and like how you said, there are modern conventions with our current cameras that allow us to manipulate it like that. And like I said, it does make it easier, but I don't want you to be lazy. Just because you can do that doesn't mean you shouldn't. Just because you can do that situation doesn't mean it doesn't help. It doesn't help to start out with the ISD, work your way up to there, and then you have your options. Because now think about it, now you have all these options to choose from that one image. One's a lot darker, but it's a lot more tonally consistent. One's a lot brighter, but it makes the person look happier. You have those options to choose from. So there's nothing wrong with that. Again, what's the darkest part here? It's easy.
Probably the wrist.
Right around there? Good. Highlight. Shining parts around here, maybe the shirt, that kind of thing. Perfect. And again, these are just more examples. Oh yeah, this is a bad one. Don't look at this one. This is terrible. All right. And again, like I said, ISD offers shape, contours, detail, and sometimes when you get that darkness just right, texture. Like, can anyone tell me, like, they can feel that little bristles right there? Sometimes that texture just works. You want to get that texture. Again, this is another variant. Like, what's the darkest part of this image? I'm sorry, I'm kind of like, doing standards, like making you write the same thing 100 times, but I just want to drill it in your head. What's the darkest part of this image? Go.
Jawline.
Jawline, good. What's the brightest?
That hard light that's behind him, or even like the hard light that's on the ground.
Hard light on the ground, right here on the hat, that kind of thing, right? You got to look for that, right? That's, I'm sorry, I'm making it sound like standardized, just standards, like back in high school, you did a bad thing and now I got to write it out 100 times, I won't do it again. But again, like you want to look for that makes these images work. And again, sometimes when you just say, you know what, I just want to work with ISD and highlight, sometimes you make someone look really nice. See that shadow there? See that highlight there? You see how it's nice and even? You see how it's nice? You have like you have your gradient. When I say gradient, does anyone get lost? No, everyone gets the good idea what I'm saying with gradient. You know, you have dark tones going from mid-tones to light tones. You get that gradient. Looks nice, makes someone look good. And he's a good-looking guy. He looks great in this image. Let's be real. And sometimes you got to work a little bit more. Again, what's the darkest part?
Like that shadow under the hair.
Right. Highlights. Window. That's right. There we go. I believe that's all the images I have right there. Right. So how are we doing on time? Okay. All right. So I've talked about. Apologies. Can you give me a little bit of water? Yeah. Sorry about that. Sorry, everybody. Well, so as I said before, we were talking about. So to kind of like put everything together that I've talked about. Why do you want to look for your shadow? The ISD, remember what I was saying, the ISD. Why are you looking for your ISD, your shadow? Why are you looking for that?
Make sure you still have detail on the darkest part.
Yes, remember what I said, it's the darkest gray with full detail. Oh, I'm so sorry, my throat was just killing me there. And okay, how do you get to your exposure from ISD? Remember, it works with aperture. Two stops.
2 steps up.
Down.
Down.
You go 2 stops down. That's how you get your exposure. Okay. Okay. Here's a curveball question. Let's say you've got everything from that, but your highlight's a little brighter than what your math shows. What do you do to your exposure? You
Bring it down like a half stop or to a full stop.
remember the term I said?
You start with 2 more down and then you adjust it a quarter or a third or a half.
The term I'm looking for is compensate. Yes, that's exactly what you do. You adjust for the highlight because if it's too bright, you bring it up a little bit to compensate for the highlight. It's not bright enough, you bring it down so that way you can get that brightness back. But the term I'm looking for is compensate. You want to compensate for the highlight. Why are shadows important? Remember the terms I was saying, those specific words. What was I saying?
Shape.
Yes, it's okay. I have those moments all the time. Shape. You want to make, one moment. You want to make shape with someone's face. What's another thing we talked about, especially with this image? Dimension, right? Dimension, shape. And there's a third thing. What did we say with something like this image right here? What's that third thing? Shape, dimension. There's a specific term I'm looking for. Starts with a T. Tone. It gives a feeling to your image. This feels like, what is the first thing you think of with this image? Just tell me. Just stay in motion. What is the thing you feel of when you look at this image? What does it make you feel?
Intimacy.
Intimacy. What else? Would I say love is one thing, right? Happiness, togetherness, joy, that kind of thing. That's why we want to use our shadows and lights. We want to give feeling. We want to make something feel. We want someone to look at this image and feel a little bit of something. With this image, you feel love, warmth, intimacy. But with this image, what do we feel?
Mystery.
I'm sorry?
Mystery.
Mystery. What else? Uneasiness. That's another good one. Anything else? How about intensity? Does anyone feel a little bit of intensity with this image? I apologize if the screen makes it a little bit difficult, but again, does anyone feel kind of an intensity or like a little bit more of like a adrenaline kind of thing, you know, boxer getting ready for a fight, that kind of thing. That's one of the things we want to. With those contrasts, those shapes, those textures, those highlights and shadows, it all comes down to making your images feel something. Especially this image here. What do you feel when you see this image? Go again with mystery. That's still a good one. Empowered. That's a good one. I'm sorry? Tension. That's a great one. Yeah, this is a tense image. It's just, he looks kind of like a villain, you know, kind of like a Marvel villain or like a superhero villain. You know what I mean?
I see a little silhouette of a man.
Are you talking about Rembrandt lighting here? Do I need to get into that? But no, yeah, exactly, right? Silhouette of a man. We have intensity. In the end, as I said before, you mix that shape, mix that dark, those shadows, those highlights, all of those things in the end to create an emotion and a feeling with your images.